Well, that sucked. Brutal loss for K-State on the road at Houston in a game that the Wildcats led by 9 in the fourth quarter. How did it all come unraveled? We will get into all of that coming up next here on 3-Maw.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
All right, 3-Maw is here with some live postgame. I'm sure a lot of you have some Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon poured, some 360 vodka poured, maybe even, like mixed the two, I mean, who cares at this point, right? Losing on the road to Houston in Willie Fritz's first year, Willie Fritz getting K-State again after 2 years ago with Tulane. I can understand any of it, but at least it will taste great because Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon is awesome from our friends at Holiday Distillery. So I know that they are grieving with us as they are great K-State fans. It's just me and Cole today. DY is covering the game, busy getting post-game right now. It'll be interesting to see what is said after that. But man, this was not a great game basically from the word go. The only reason that K-State had a level of control in the game was because of a strip sack that turned into a touchdown at the very end of the first half when it looked like K-State was going to go into the locker room, potentially trailing like 13-9. It turned into 16-10 K-State pretty fast by putting together by far the best sequence of the game. Then in the second half, I mean, just could never really move the ball and break open the game, really take control. And all you needed like one more play. You needed like one more score. You needed the field goal to be a touchdown, something to get a full 2-score lead on these guys to really feel content. But instead, you're just clinging to a 9-point lead. It's feeling pretty dangerous. There's bad weather, a lot of mistakes happening throughout the game. You're having to go to your backup long snapper because you can't snap the ball on special teams. Just kind of a comedy of errors. And with all of that, you could sense something like that coming. Avery Johnson throws an interception deep in K-State's own territory, turns into a touchdown, and then Houston scores. It just felt so inevitable from the time that the ball left Avery Johnson's hand on the interception there. It felt inevitable that was going to wind up being a loss. That, at least to me, it did. I did not have very much confidence at all that the offense, with the rain and the conditions especially, was going to really be able to consistently move the ball enough to keep it away. And Houston just had just enough opportunities on offense to get it done.
Oh, it was raining. So K-State's up 19-10, and they're inside their own 15-yard line. They're up 2 scores on a Houston team that's not scored in 5 consecutive drives. And in those 5 drives, 48 yards of offense on 20 plays, an average of 2.4 yards per play. There's under 12 minutes left in the game. It's pouring rain. The football's wet. Houston's the worst passing team in the Big 12 and arguably the worst passing team among all Power 4 schools. And Connor Riley and this K-State coaching staff elects to throw the ball. Inexplicable decision by this coaching staff. Avery Johnson makes a mistake on the throw. It is a wet football. You are throwing the ball over the middle of the field. It's danger territory. You're backed up inside your own 15-yard line. If you just punt the ball away, even if it's not a very good punt, which K-State special teams were a disaster today. Even if you just punt it, you run it twice, it's under 10 minutes left in the game against a Houston team that can't score the football, that's got 10 points in the entirety of the game. And at that point, they're probably a drop-back passing team, down 9 points with under 10 minutes left in the game. And again, they are probably the worst passing team in Power 4 football. And K-State inexplicably throws the football in that situation, even though, I get they couldn't run the ball, and that's another thing we'll hit on. Like, the offensive line needs to be better as well by a lot. I mean, disastrous performance by K-State's rushing attack. But you just have to keep the ball on the ground at that point. You got to understand the conditions, the elements of the game, time and score. You can't be throwing the ball over the middle of the field. It can't be the call. It was a mistake by the coaching staff. I thought Willie Fritz outcoached K-State staff once again, just like in 2022. So disaster by the K-State offense there. And that's what swung the game, John. If K-State just keeps the ball on the ground there, up 19-10 and punts it away, they win the game. But you give them a short field and they only have to go 9 yards on 3 plays. Consider this. Houston had 232 yards of offense on 52 plays. That is 4.46 yards per play. But 4 of their plays in the game out of the 52 made up 146 of their yards. They had 86 yards of offense on their other 48 plays, 1.8 yards per play. Awful. And now K-State missed tackles a couple times, and that led to explosives. But if you punt the ball and make Houston drive the field, it wasn't happening. So that's a coaching error, and that ultimately falls on this staff.
Well, even just beyond that, I mean, the team just did not look very prepared today. Like, just no juice, no energy. And I get that it's hard at Houston and in the rain, and you had a weather delay, but I mean, it's supposed to be a program about culture, and that's how and why they win. And I guess to their credit, it was a nice response to a pretty rough first half when they turned around and got that sequence at the end of the first half. And I know Brock Heward was making the point on the broadcast about, what an impressive job that was. And it did kind of feel like it at that time. Like, all right, you got the game back on the rails, but then they let it go right back off. I mean, they let it sail back off the rails again. And that's what's really frustrating here. I mean, this felt much more like BYU sort of K-State, just playing a team that was not good enough to capitalize quite the way that BYU could. Now, it wasn't totally a bevy of turnovers, but a lot of thoughts. Bigger picture, I will say a couple of things. One, the formula to get to the Big 12 championship game really didn't change all that much because Iowa State lost. So we can get to that, but now you just got to be rooting for a Colorado loss. But 2, also, they've just been flirting with this for a while, man. I mean, there've been a lot of close calls and games against teams like Tulane and Kansas that they arguably should have lost, that they didn't. So you knew this type of thing, they were capable of it. But I'll pose this on the coaching point that you're making, which I'm with you. I thought that was pretty bad to be putting the ball in the air at that point. Pin back where you're at, and because that's like the one thing you can't have happen at that point. 19-10, you got to just kind of turtle it. Things are not going well. The weather's not conducive to moving the ball. You have not been playing well. You got to just park the bus, to steal like a soccer term, man. You just park the bus, keep punting it, let your defense play defense. And, there's no real threat there of them throwing the ball in the rain, especially.
Yeah.
So you just keep punting the ball, and playing defense and let the clock roll. And I think you probably would have been fine. You are right. Now, the one defense I will give to Connor Riley in that position is that his offensive line has not been blocking very well. They have not been getting much push really for the last 3 games, and we didn't see much of it once again. So they weren't running the ball well. I saw people complaining in my mentions. All right, well, why is Avery not running the ball more? I just, you saw when Avery had to go up the middle, right? When they were doing some read option, there were a couple of times where he's going down, and I get it. He's trying not to take hits, but he would go down quick when he got down in the middle, just lying down. He's not trying to take hits at all. I do think there's part of that. I think by the end of the game, he just looked kind of gassed. He wasn't able to turn the corner a couple of times. So I don't know if they really had that luxury. It didn't seem like even that was being that effective. Dylan Edwards had like 1 or 2 nice runs. I remember like an 11-yard run that he popped at one point, but it's not like that was working great either. So some of the issue here is just like, what do you go to? I mean, they tried like a dump down. They tried to dump down to DJ at one point that got everybody frustrated, and I understood it at that point. I believe that was 3rd and long. Some of those weren't even being completed. They're bobbling that. I will say Connor was a bit handcuffed in that there was not a whole lot that was working. The ultimate point is, like we said, run it up the gut 3 times, punt it. You're probably, but they did not have a lot that was really working up.
Look, and I fully acknowledge that, I mean, a couple drives before that, they dropped back and threw it in a 61-yard pass to Jace Brown. Was a beautiful throw, is what led to them getting up by 2 scores. And I understand that, but time and score, again, you get up by 2 scores in that situation. You watch what that Houston offense is doing. And I know people will probably be like Houston's 12 of 12 passing. I mean, they're 12 of 12 passing for 103 yards. And 2 of the passing attempts were 44 and 33 yards early in the game. They both occurred early in that game. Their other 10 completions were for 34 yards combined, 3.4 yards per pass. So look, Zion Chris had thrown for 244 yards through the air all season. It's the least explosive passing attack in the country. in the rain, let alone. And so that's where you just have to understand that you got to, hope you can pick up 8 yards in a couple plays running the football. And if you don't, you just got to punt the football at that point and trust your defense against a Houston team that's probably going to be drop back and throwing the football at that point, and you've been bottling them up for most of the time. But I mean, look, there were multiple errors before that obviously played a key part. I mean, K-State on the very first drive of the second half, there's a 3rd and half yard, and Avery pulled the ball out on a read play, it looked like, and you run it up the middle, you probably get the first down. Instead, you lose 5 yards, you go to kick a field goal, you botch the snap and the hold, you don't get it up off the ground, it's still 16-10. That's an opportunity where you probably should have went down and got points at worst, at least 3, potentially 7. You get up 23-10. Houston's in a world of danger at that point. First drive of the game, you got 2nd and 3.5 inside the 5-yard line. You drop back and throw the ball twice. After a 7-yard run, you had guys miss blocks, or else Avery probably scores on the first down run. There, you get up 7-0, and that maybe changes the course of the game. And so there were missed opportunities throughout the entirety of the game, and a lot of mistakes that looked like a team that wasn't really ready to play early, but they recovered from it. And then when you get up by 16-10 and go into halftime and you're driving to start the second half, like, you're like, all right, they're settled in, they're good to go. You don't score then. You still bounce back. You get up 19-10, and you have multiple opportunities, and you just don't capitalize. Very frustrating to lose a game where you give up 32 yards of offense from your opponent. That is tough to stomach, and it is tough to stomach that arguably the country's best P4 rushing attack, second best probably at this point going into today, averages 2.6 yards per carry and 89 yards on the ground on 34 rushing attempts. And outside of a couple of explosive runs, John, over the last 2-3 games, they haven't been able to run the ball consistently since the Colorado game. I mean, you got to go back to first half.
First half
yeah.
in Boulder. Yeah.
Yeah, which that Colorado defense is probably better than most at this point that they played in those last 3 weeks too. And they just haven't been able to run the football, and that falls on the offensive line largely. There's not a lot of holes to run to. Today, your longest runs are 13 and 10 yards. DJ just hasn't been able to get it going on the ground. I think he had 50 yards today, 17 carries. Dylan had a 13-yard run. Very, very disappointing performance. A game you're favored to win by 13, a game you need to win, and you had control of it, and you just didn't finish. And like you said, they were toying with danger for a while. We talked about winning these closer games. They were 3-0 in one-score games, and you keep playing with fire, you're going to get burned eventually, in case they got burned today.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's go through though. Like, there were so many things that were just dumb kind of signs of what was going to come, like just little moments that you can go back. Like, if you really want to, it is weird. Like, they just played so poorly overall, and there were so many stupid things that happened in this game that I'm not really agonized by going back and being like, oh, hey, if this one little thing happens, the outcome changes, just because you're like so frustrated and mad at the effort and performance overall today. But, I mean, the way Chris Tennant's been kicking the ball, he drilled like what was it, like a 47-yarder that he hit. They're lining up for a 53-yarder. And whatever's going on with the snap and the hold is going on with the snap and the hold. I guess we got our answer as to who that was really more on, because they changed long snappers. But you have that. You obviously had a missed extra point because of the same issue. And then, you hit the long ball, the explosive, somehow in the rain to Jace Brown, which is just like, I mean, completely like that should have been the play that won the game. And I think that's kind of our point with that did get you up 19-10. That should have been the play that won you the game. But how about just a stupid block in the back penalty that sets that drive back? Once you got the first down there, you get a block in the back, and you just knew at that point, all right, well, this is going to wind up being just a long field. You just play for a long field goal. I mean, that's another thing there. The first field goal drive, right? All the way back to the first drive of the game. Was it Garrett Oakley who's not like holding a block there, and Avery Johnson could have scored on that run around the end to like the right front pylon? Could have scored, but you're not prolonging a block enough there. It felt like that probably should have been there, and it winds up turning into a field goal. Avery, as Brock Heward pointed out, missed a wide open tight end on the third down play where he throws to Jace Brown, who's running a route out of bounds in the back of the end zone, and Avery is still throwing the ball to him. Like, just, so many dumb things where you leave, 4 to 12 or so points on the board. And on a day like today, when you weren't going to be able to run the ball and you didn't have that fastball that we talked about the other day, you were going to need more of those. You're going to need to squeeze more of those out. You didn't have that. You didn't have the luxury of letting little things like that go.
Yeah, no, it all adds up. I mean, you could have avoided being in that situation in the first place if you capitalize and guys do their assignments and their roles earlier in the game. You look at the second half dating back to the KU game, John. I mean, they had the 4-play, 75-yard drive to start the second half of the KU game. And since then, they've had 14 drives and not a single touchdown in the second half of games. That's not good. And you look at that second half against Houston today, your first 7 drives to start the second half, you have 100 yards on 30 plays, and 61 of those yards came on one play to Jace Brown. So you ran 29 other plays on those first 7 drives for 39 yards. 29 plays for 39 yards. K-State's offense isn't good enough right now, and especially in the second half. And again, they're not running the ball well. And I know people will be like, I'm being hypocritical then by saying they need to keep it on the ground, when there's 11, 12 minutes left in the game and they're not running it well. But again, it just comes back to you got to feel the game out at that point. Houston's not going to win the game if you just punt the ball, assuming you get off a punt that goes more than 25 or 30 yards. But
that's another issue. Yeah.
Special teams, not outside of Chris Tennant, special teams poor. Once again, you had the muffed kick return early on in the game that set you up inside the 15-yard line. You have some short punts in the game. You obviously have the botch on the extra point. You have the botch on the field goal attempt, and just not getting an advantageous field position. We talked a couple weeks ago, K-State had the worst Power 4 field position in college football, starting field position, and I imagine that will only get worse. So very, very frustrating. It helps that Iowa State loses in the grand scheme of things, assuming Colorado loses one more time. Though, frankly, John, at this point, I don't know if Colorado will lose again.
I don't either, man. I mean, maybe they do have to go to Lubbock next week. That's probably the.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that actually. So that Tech's going to be coming out. Can Tech avoid the flat spot? I mean, they probably can. Coming off, that was impressive what Tech did in Ames today. So, I mean, you could look at it and be like, you were going to have to win out anyways, even if you lost today, and Iowa State losing that game. And so, assuming Colorado loses, if Colorado loses next week, you go into the bye week next week at the end of it, and you look ahead to Arizona State or Cincinnati. I can never remember which one is next. Arizona State, and you're in the same situation you would have been if you beat Houston, to be honest. So, if Colorado could lose that game in Lubbock, then you reset the table and you just hope you can bounce back. But K-State has to get a lot better.
Yeah, the rest of Colorado's schedule, they've got Utah at home, which I imagine wouldn't be too much of an issue. They go to Kansas, KU at Arrowhead. Problem is that game will be November 23rd. We'll see where KU's give a shit level is at that point. But to play Colorado, honestly, they might get up for that. It's possible, but I'm with you. Like Colorado, honestly, right now, if you told me like Big 12 championship game is BYU Colorado, I'd be 1, very intrigued to watch that game, and 2, like I might take Colorado to win that game right now. Like John, I think that's very, very, very possible.
Remind me of the tiebreakers though, John, because
if it's a thing, and I thought I had it, and then I didn't have it but I think I have it generally figured out right now. So, are you talking about if Colorado were to lose?
Three-way tie situation. So let's say Colorado loses one more. Well, I guess there wouldn't be a 3-way tie, right? Because it's unlikely BYU loses twice. Right?
I don't think I think BYU might lose once. I doubt that they're losing twice. So you're talking about a 3-way tie between K-State, Iowa State, and
BYU. Yeah. And the reason I was asking that is because I thought you had mentioned a common opponent in KU and Houston being one, and K-State lost to Houston now. But that's in a 3-way tie event, I believe, right? And so, but did Colorado even play? Colorado didn't play Houston.
Cool. Let's just if the 3-way tie is K-State, Colorado, and Iowa State, and it's who's going to the Big 12 championship game to play BYU, none of that matters because you would have beaten Iowa State and Colorado.
You're right.
So
yeah, it's a moot point then at that point. All right, so don't worry about that then. I was just bringing that up, wondering how that would work out. But yeah, and then if I don't see BYU losing twice at this point, so I don't think there's going to be a 4-way tie scenario that comes into play. Bottom line is, if K-State wins out and Colorado loses next week in Lubbock again, and Tech has plenty to play for. Like Tech's probably thinking right now, like they're sitting at 6-3. They got 2 league losses, right?
Tech's still in it. Tech's still technically in it. Yeah.
So that should be a great atmosphere in Lubbock, and impressive what Tech did today. And Iowa State kept flirting with danger. I mean, think about what they've gotten away with over the last few weeks and skating by with wins, and it finally bit them today.
I mean, 100%. Let's cover that on the other side, because I think K-State and Iowa State are very, very similar in that regard. Well, I made sure to still show up today in my home field apparel, even after a loss. I've still got you sponsors, homefieldapparel.com, to get the best K-State gear around. You can still look good, win or lose. You can wear this exact same hoodie that I'm wearing right now, for those of you that are watching on YouTube. And you can get 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. So just go to homefieldapparel.com. Use promo code 3MA24. That's promo code 3MA24 to get 15% off your first order. Or, hey, if you want to get some Texas Tech gear for next week, cheer for them to beat Colorado, you can do that at homefieldapparel.com as well. Thank you to our friends at Home Field Apparel. We're back in just a moment.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com. You know, when you discover a new binge-worthy show or a song that you play on repeat and you just have to share it with your friends so they can experience just how awesome it is too? Well, that's how we felt when we discovered that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. It's such an awesome deal, there's no way we could keep it to ourselves. Friends don't let friends overpay for wireless. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plan and switch to Mint Mobile. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text, delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your own phone number and bring along all your friends. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/3ma. That's mintmobile.com/3ma. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/3ma. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
So let's branch out now, bigger picture here for what we'll call the top storyline, which is brought to you by our friends at Alenco. For all your home improvement needs, just head on over to alencohome.com, ALENCO home.com. Great K-State people who I'm sure are very upset like all of us today, and they are locally owned. So K-State and Iowa State had definitely both been flirting with this for a while. In fact, when Iowa State scored to go ahead late in the game, I almost tweeted, like, haven't we seen this movie like 5 times at this point? Like, Iowa State has made a habit of starting very slow, getting behind, and then having to have these furious comebacks. Maybe not always furious, but even like the Baylor game, they fell behind 14-3. UCF, obviously, they had problems. So Iowa State had been doing the same thing. They finally got burned, even though, Baron Morton, trying to watch that down the stretch as K-State was busy choking away the Houston game was, an interesting exercise there. But you also, Baron Morton missed like a wide open receiver twice, like a deep ball that could have won the game. It still drove him down and scored and won. That was a ballsy drive from Texas Tech. But K-State's been doing the same thing, man. I mean, to be honest, yeah, was there we agreed with the call, but there was a little fortune in that. I'll say that Tulane decided to go with a pick play down at the end of the game, or that very easily could have been a loss there at the beginning of the year. I know that doesn't affect the Big 12 standings, but it certainly still would have hurt. Then in Big 12 play, Colorado, there are some similarities to the Colorado game from this one, where you were in control for 75% of the game. You're not in control. Honestly, they controlled the Colorado game for a lot longer than they did this game against Houston. But late in the game, you're up by a couple of scores. You let it slip away. It happens pretty fast. Difference being you made the plays to win the game there. Kansas, again, that felt a little more in the vein of this, where it's like, man, you just maybe didn't deserve to win. Really, we're not playing all that well. but found a way, and Kansas made some of those mistakes. Houston didn't make the mistakes. Houston really did not make the mistakes, and you finally got burned. There are a lot of things that worked against you. You and DY had really been pushing the narrative about the weather throughout this weekend, and I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, okay. But that definitely played a factor, that definitely played a factor. It hurt you being able to utilize the passing game as much. May have played a factor in the interception. Just a lot of things that were working against you on the road, like will happen. And no excuses. Like it just, when you keep doing that and you keep putting yourself in those positions in games that you should have more control over, eventually you'll slip up and lose one. And that's what happened.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the road success, I mean, they played a lot of tight games, and then West Virginia, they blew them out. But then, you keep playing with fire, and situations like this happen. And the weather, I mean, yeah, the rain played a part, though, to be candid. I mean, I thought K-State threw it relatively well for much of the game until that fourth quarter, when you consider the driving conditions. I mean, the ball from Avery, as he's about to get hit, to Jace for that 61-yard pass, I mean, that was a dime. And I mean, they converted some big third down. I think there was a fourth down conversion as well, where Avery saw the field, navigated, worked around things, and completed it. I thought they threw the ball relatively effectively given the weather conditions. To the point where, I'm kind of to the point where it's like, why can't they run the ball better? And I know people are like, oh, they ran for over 200 last week. But again, I mean, it was a few explosives and not a lot of success in between the tackles, but they've been throwing the ball effectively enough that you would think that they'd be able to run it a little bit better, because they've been throwing it better over the last 5 weeks than they did the first several weeks when they were running it great. And against KU, it didn't feel like they were loading the box against K-State. Just felt like they weren't getting a ton of push or opening up a lot of running lanes on the inside. And so, weather certainly played a part. It's a wacky game. You got the delay to start things. Fortunate you didn't have another delay. Thought that could happen as we were heading into the game. But you ultimately got to overcome that thing. You're far enough into the season that you got to overcome the weather conditions and the elements, and you're playing in kind of a lethargic, flat atmosphere. Like, my concern was K-State would come into this game flat, coming off the big road wins and then your game against your rival. And I thought they did come into the game probably flat, but they overcame that. And you get into halftime up 16-10, and then you ultimately push it out to a 2-score lead. And at that point, you need to close the game. So very, very frustrating, very disappointing. But in the big picture, again, like you said, John, I mean, you've still got a shot to get to the Big 12 championship. You need a little bit of help now to control your own destiny. But, if you look at like the win probability odds, it would probably say in favor that one of those teams that you need to lose, aka Colorado, is probably going to lose one of their last 4 games. And then you're going to be right back in the same boat where you need to win your last 3 games here. Now, you eliminate any at-large possibility, even though that was probably a slim shot at best, to where if you lose in the Big 12 championship, you get in at like 11-2, right? You're not getting in now if you lose in the Big 12 title and finish 10-3. There's no at-large berth on the table. So you just got to win out. And you get to the Big 12 championship, you got to win it.
Well, the brutal part of this today was for the conference. This was a wretched day for the conference trying to get 2 teams in, with Iowa State and K-State both losing. Because before today, I think BYU, K-State, and Iowa State all had at least a chance. There was a scenario where they could be an at-large in there. Now you've lost 2 of those. So if someone still goes through and beats BYU in the Big 12 championship game, maybe BYU could still get in as an at-large, depending on how crazy things wind up being. But now also the profile of K-State for sure, and somewhat Iowa State, is going to be lessened a little bit too because of these losses. Some of that will depend on how Tech finishes out. I mean, the disappointing thing for me is I felt like from a Big 12 perspective, I was like, all right, starting November, you got 4 teams that still have legitimate playoff aspirations. And you've got 2 unbeatens, and K-State has a lot of respect as a 1-loss team. Now, feels like a lot of that's crumbled, and it's playing right back into the narrative, just that, hey, it's a crazy league with a lot of, teams that are okay, that are going to jump up and beat each other in ways that surprise you. So I think it's been a pretty bad Saturday for the Big 12. Plenty of time to go before the end of the season. BYU could still turn out to be like 2022 TCU. We'll see. But not a great day overall for the league, and K-State definitely played a role in that.
It's probably a 1-bid league at this point in the grand scheme of things. I mean, The only way you could get 2 in is if BYU runs the table, goes 12-0 in the regular season and loses in the Big 12 championship game. And if they finish 12-1 and lose in that game, they're probably not going to get punished all that much. They'll probably get in, and the Big 12 champion will also get in. But if BYU slips up and loses one game in their last 4, and then that situation, it's probably a 1 bid league. Yeah. And so keep in mind, this Houston team lost 27-7 to UNLV. Their first game of the season. And I know UNLV's turned into a really solid group of 5 school, but it's an offense that certainly struggles to move the ball, 17 points or less in 6 of their 8 games coming into today against Kansas State. And so, yeah, I mean, it definitely hurts the Big 12's reputation when you have Iowa State and K-State go down to a couple of teams. Keep in mind, Texas Tech gave up 51 or whatever to Abilene Christian. And got smoked by one.
They gave up 59 to Baylor 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So there's this, there's a lot of parity in this league, and I think you could look at a lot of the other leagues like the ACC and stuff. Like Miami flirts with danger a lot. They were flirting with danger with Duke for much of today, and then they ended up winning big. But yeah, it's not a good day for the league either. But ultimately, my mindset on Kansas State, not a good day at all there, and just. John, candidly, very frustrating that Chris Klieman keeps having losses like these every year. We talk about the duds going into the season, and I try to dismiss it this year, and it just keeps happening at this point. And that's frustrating to me, that there's just some of these inexplicable losses where you lose as a double-digit favorite.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of giving you some grief earlier. I was like, remember that conversation we had about the dud games back in the fall or summer? I guess it was like a late summer. And unfortunately, we've seen, you could argue we've seen a couple. I will give them grace on Kansas, because I do think Kansas is a legitimately talented team that just can't finish, and was highly, highly motivated for that game. But, Tulane wasn't great. The weird thing is, Cole, it's like when they've had these road game atmospheres, I guess BYU went really poorly, and that was charged up. But like Colorado and West Virginia, they played pretty damn well. But when you go into these atmospheres with no energy, no juice at all, half full stadiums at best at Houston and Tulane, that's where they've really struggled. But yeah, I think at this point, this is kind of just Chris Klieman. Like, I think he's a very good coach, but he will always leave you wishing that there was not that one game where they really did lay an egg. And this definitely becomes the ultimate one so far this year. As bad as BYU was, we're now looking at what BYU is, and combine that with the fact that, Houston's just a team that you should be beating. You were a much heavier favorite. It's tough, man. It's tough. I love Klieman. I love the guy. Try not to come down too reactionarily too hard, because I would also point out, Cole, that there, to me, are some similarities here to what we experienced in 2022 when they had lost a couple games. We felt like, all right, just win out, you'll be okay. They have that Texas game that was really frustrating. They still should have played Will Howard. Instead, they rolled with Adrian Martinez. They lose a close game, and you thought, well, there goes the opportunity to just have it in your own hands. Now you need help. They got help. They won out, and they won the Big 12 championship and beat TCU, and it still wound up being a pretty special year. So, yeah, it definitely could be the same.
No, it's a very fair way to put it. The odds are in your favor that Colorado is going to slip up at some point. They were less in your favor that year with Texas needing to lose in 2022. When we looked at Texas's schedule, recall after they won in Manhattan, it did not feel likely that Texas would lose again. I think Texas was favored by 6 or 7 going into that TCU game in Austin, and then they got beat 17-10, I want to say. And that opened the door right back up for Kansas State, and then they just went on a run and dominated. Now, they had KU at home on the schedule, and at West Virginia, which was a team that didn't go to a bowl, and at Baylor, who turned up being a 6-6 type team. So a little different than daunting road task at Iowa State to close the season with potentially the Big 12 championship on the line, a far more challenging game. But at that point, give me that scenario. I think K-State fans all at that point just take it one game and you're in to get to the Big 12 championship, get to that last game of the season. Obviously, you still got to take care of business in your 2 games at home. And you'll be there, assuming Colorado slips up and loses one. So, yeah, I think that's fair analysis to bring up and bring to speed the what happened in 2022. And this is probably less of a long shot than what happened in 2022 to be in that scenario.
Yeah. I would also just say too, I mean, look, I know people are pissed right now. We're pissed. But I mean, I had the team at 9-3. I guess if you were someone that had an 11-1 season, but I had the team at 9-3, and it feels like it's trending very much toward 9-3. So in terms of my expectation, it's really not that far off. And Houston, say what you will, like Houston has had some nice moments this year. I mean, they demolished TCU on their home field. They did find a way to beat Utah. They almost beat Oklahoma in Norman. Like it's not a bad team, and Willie Fritz is just a damn good coach. I mean, that's one thing. It's not going to be fun playing Houston from here on out when Willie Fritz starts to get this program a little bit more developed and more of his guys in. I mean, they have some dudes right now on defense. They definitely do. But if they can formulate any semblance of an offense, that guy can clearly game plan and clearly coach. That was such a great hire for Houston, like so much more substance over style. Whereas before they had more style with like your Dana Holgorsen, Tom Herman type of guys. So I think he's going to be a great coach. Moving forward, look, if K-State's going to do that, if they're going to pull it off, if they're going to salvage something of the rest of the season, the running game, here's one theory that I have on the running game. Did we just grossly overrate what happened against I just lost the beginning of the schedule here. Like UT Martin, Tulane, Arizona and Oklahoma State. I mean, it turns out those two defenses are not very good at all. BYU, I guess you can make the argument to me like they were running pretty well against BYU until they had to just abandon the run game. But that maybe they just ran into a pretty easy part of the schedule in terms of the run defenses that they were facing. And now it's tightened up a little bit and they're struggling. Like how much of it would you associate with that as opposed to just things going downhill on K-State's end?
I mean, I think a portion of that can be credited or attributed to the opposing defenses that they went up against. I don't think all of it, obviously, because, I mean, you should have ran – well, I keep saying this, like KU, they ran for 225 plus. It just didn't feel as effective between the success rate and between the tackles. But, the final box score looks good. West Virginia is a good team against the run, and Houston had held a pretty good number of their teams or opponents in check when it comes to the running game. I mean, look, we all know Houston's defense is the strength of their football team. And I think when you look at like a points per drive efficiency basis, probably I want to say second best defense K-State's faced behind Colorado. When you look at points per drive, I'm trying to recall Tulane, I think, might be ahead of them too, but in Big 12 play, the second best when it comes to that category behind only Colorado. So look, I mean, Willie Fritz's unit, the defense is a strength. And, one of my concerns was when I knew it was going to be kind of ugly weather is Houston was going to be able to bottle up and control the rushing attack at K-State, but K-State's got to be able to run the ball better than 89 yards and 2.6 yards per carry. And so that's a big frustration and just no explosives in the rushing game. K-State had been one of the more explosive rushing attacks in the country, and you just don't get any explosiveness out of the running game in this one, which would have been a huge boost, obviously. So very disappointing. And yeah, I think the schedule, to get back to your point, that plays a part when it comes to the rushing attack. But you still got to be better on the ground regardless of the opponent. I mean, this program under Chris Klieman and Connor Riley is built on being able to run the football. And right now they're not doing a very good job of it.
Yeah. It is not great. It is not great. I mean, I don't know what are the solutions here? What do? You've got a bye week, I guess. So I'd imagine they're going to try to get creative and do something. They got pretty creative against Kansas, and I felt like that made it work. But I don't know. I don't know what the moves are that are left at this point. I mean, it's just crazy, dude. After the Colorado game, we're having the conversation about Deuce Vaughn and DJ Giddens, and it just, I mean, snap your fingers, and that has completely gone away. And that's what they're missing. I mean, make no mistake. I know we've kind of said this already tonight, but if you have the DJ Giddens ground game that you can just pound at him in the rain, when you're up 19-10, this really shouldn't be much of a problem. Even if you're just picking up a couple of first downs and punting, you'll get out of there just fine. But they did not have that at all.
Yep. Nothing really working. The short passing game, second half, not really working either. And yeah.
All right, I don't know. Where do you go from here? Like what needs to happen? What's the checklist during the bye week?
I don't know. It sucks to sucks to sit on losses going into bye weeks. I feel like that's happened before where you've had to sit on one of these tough losses going into a bye week, and it's not fun. I mean, I don't know. Like they got to get back. I mean, Chris Klieman in his post game, I saw a tweet. He blamed it all on the fundamentals and execution. So maybe they just feel like they got to get back to basics and fundamentals, and they got to win the line of scrimmage offensively up front and not miss so many blocks. I guess I mean, John, honestly, I don't know. Like, I'm not a football coach. I don't know what they work on during this bye week. I don't have a lot of answers, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to hear what Curry says on that front.
Yeah. Curry will have a better perspective than I do, because I don't know what they need to. I mean, they got to be able to run the ball better. They got to take care of the ball better. I mean, Houston was one of the worst teams in turnover margin in the country. In K-State, that's where it felt like if you just don't turn the ball over, you don't make mistakes, you win the game, which gets back to, you make that interception. And that's so incredibly costly because you give them a short field where they only have to go 9 yards. And so I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss for words when it comes to just turning it around. I guess as a fan, you just hope this is kind of a one-off and that the bye week they can get reset, get healthy, and get back to the basics and be better again like they were in 2022 to finish out the season.
Well, let me finish on a note that I'm sure will make you thrilled. Did you see the quote? Well, I'll just read it to you. You may have seen it already, but Kellis tweeted, Chris Klieman defended K-State's decision to throw the ball with a 19-10 lead in the rain. Quote, "We weren't running the ball a lick." Also said that he wasn't comfortable playing ultra conservative when that meant punting into the wind and giving the ball to Houston at midfield.
Yeah, that's that's not I disagree strongly with that. I mean, I think I've made it clear why I disagree with it. Yeah, you give them the ball at midfield. How many times, John, did Houston have the ball? Like, didn't Houston get the ball in good field position multiple times but not score? It felt like throughout the game they had it a couple different times in good field position and weren't able to capitalize. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about the fact that K-State didn't run the ball effectively, but at that point, I'm looking at some of Houston's starting field position. Houston had a drive. Okay, they started at their own 47 that they did score a touchdown on. They got a field goal that started at their own 41. I mean, there's another example of terrible field position. They had a drive to start. I'd have to go through the box. They had a drive that started on their own 45 early in the second half. That was a turnover on downs. Yeah, I don't know. I'd rather give them the ball at the 50 than the 9-yard line and make them do that. So
I guess I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit again here, and just in fairness to Klieman and the coaching staff, I do feel like one of the common criticisms over the Chris Klieman era has been that they have been too conservative, and we've always wanted them to be a little bit more aggressive in some of these situations. So, I agree with you. I do not think that this was the time for it. I agree with you, but there have been many a time where we have criticized him for not being aggressive enough.
Well, so here's the thing, John. I mean, I was fine being conservative 19-10. Then it's 19-17, right? So it's a 2-point game and a field goal beats you.
And then they went very, very conservative.
Yeah. You see the hypocrite. You go Avery Johnson run for no gain, or Avery Johnson run for a loss of a yard. Avery Johnson 0 yards, and then a pass to the flat with nothing downfield to punt the football, similar to what happened at Tulane in that situation. And Connor Riley said he learned from that. And again, not the best conditions to have to go back and throw the football, certainly. But you went conservative up 2, you went aggressive up 9. That's where I struggle with that. That's inconsistent to me.
Yeah, well, some of it too. I mean, Avery was taking check downs. I thought a little bit too quickly a couple of times throughout the game. Last drive, he gets duped by, it was a pretty good play by the linebacker, but also, I mean, I don't know, whatever. The second to last drive, right? The last drive where they really had some actual control to it. The interception that he threw, I definitely saw the point that Brock Heward was making with that being a really good play by the linebacker, but that is an awfully tight window to be throwing into. That is, though, when we come back to the game plan, and like, I don't know, I had K-State fans in my mentions kind of being like, stop giving Willie Fritz credit. That's all on us. The game plan of just keeping everybody back, right? Like K-State couldn't run the ball, so they could just put everybody back like in a cloud and just make it tough, make really difficult windows be the only thing that Avery Johnson could try to throw into. And that worked really well. So I don't know. You have any thoughts on that drive?
Which drive was it?
The second to last drive, when they're still, it's not the Hail Mary drive, but it's the drive before when they're down by 5 and they still have an opportunity to go score and win.
Yeah. I mean, Avery, I mean, that was a bad throw by Avery, a bad decision. He threw it behind the receiver, throws it out in front. Maybe it's a catch. I think he probably, if you look at like the all 22, probably would have been better served going down the sideline to either Jace in single man coverage. I think he had another guy running down the opposite sideline, maybe in single man, and instead threw it over the middle and it got picked. And if the throw's on the money, it could be a catch, but it's a tight window, a little bit behind. They make a nice play. They pick it. You still had time to probably do some different things. You didn't need a home run play necessarily. You had 2 timeouts, minute 55 left on the clock. You could maybe even ran the ball if they had a light box and you liked the look. But that felt like Avery forcing a throw. It didn't feel like that drive was going to result in a touchdown, even though K-State had come up against Colorado. It just, the way the weather and everything, it just felt unlikely that K-State against a solid Houston defense was going to be able to come up in that moment big. And so,
yeah, no, did not at all.
Yeah, Houston, they made a play. Avery didn't make a good throw there. I mean, look, there's criticism for Avery as well. He would acknowledge that.
He did, by the way. I saw Kellis's tweet. He put the blame on himself, mainly for the interception that turned into a touchdown.
Yeah. So it's he didn't play his best in this game either. A lot of guys hold accountability for this. His offensive line, missed. I mean, even though the defense ultimately held them, pretty well in check the majority of the game, there were missed tackles, errors in coverage. So this is a team loss. Special teams poor. So it falls on the players as well, not just the coaching staff, but ultimately the coaches have to get these guys ready to play, and they didn't get the job done tonight. So
is it time for my weekly special teams rant? Like, man, Chris Tennant deserves all the credit in the world. Like, he continues to just be a stud, and he's ready to go. If somebody can get the ball down for him, he's going to blast it right through. But yeah, you're right. The one thing, man, if you go to you look at Parker Fleming's graphs every single week, the one glaring square that is always horrific for K-State is average starting field position. Like, it's just bad. I know you went and got this NFL special teams coach that is supposed to be awesome. And I don't know. Chris Tennant said he is awesome. I don't know, man. There have been some moments, but it's not been very consistent at all. And they've had a lot of moments in games like this where you're just left like, dude, what? This is not, they have not earned special teams by any stretch of the imagination, dude. And like in a game like this, could have really used that to be pretty tight and buttoned up to help win on the margins when everything else was kind of going to hell. So special teams has not impressed me very much all year long, outside of Chris Tennant, who is a boss. But,
Yeah, the punting game wasn't good today. You also, what set you up inside right around the 10-yard line, John, when you were up 9 was, Dylan didn't field that punt and it bounces and rolls around the 10-yard line. So you're backed up a little bit. Now, to be clear, I wasn't entirely all that upset with that because
of the rain.
It's raining.
Yeah.
And I actually told my buddy that was with me, he even said, maybe don't even put anybody back. And that gets back to throwing the ball later, because my point to him was, I said, I feel like the only way Houston can win this game at this point is if you turn it over or muff a punt like this and give them a short field. So I'm fine letting it roll. So I'm not going to harp on that all that much. Though you had multiple kick return opportunities in this game, which is rare in today's sport because of the wind and the weather. And what did K-State's kick returns get to? The 26, 1 to the 15? I don't know. Special teams wasn't good other than Chris Tennant. So they had a punt they had a couple punts where the net was 28 and 27 yards. And again, I know it's not ideal conditions to punt the football and be great there, but the special teams outside, you think about it, like the Arizona game, you've got the big kick punt return by Dylan Edwards. And outside of that, there just hasn't been a lot of remarkable plays from special teams outside of Chris Tennant being great.
Yep. No, there's not. Now we're at a point where like the staff, you don't have to worry about, do we have a full-time special teams coordinator and does that take a position away from the staff? That doesn't matter at all anymore. The excuses are gone on figuring special teams the hell out. So I don't know, that'll have to suffice as my special teams rant for today. Any final thoughts before we depart here?
No, just hopefully, the right losses come your way. Cheer for Texas Tech next week. And then hopefully we can all go into that Arizona State game on November 16th with a nice energy level to get back on track, win a couple home games. Hopefully this team bounces back and shows the resiliency of that 2022 team and can get its feet on the ground and respond to some adversity, which they have been decent at doing in the Chris Klieman era when everybody kind of counts them out or everybody's frustrated at a high level. So they still have a shot to get to the Big 12 championship, as frustrating as tonight was. So hopefully they get the break that falls their way and they bounce back.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Well, thank you to our friends at Home Field. Thank you to our friends at Holiday Distillery, our friends at Elenco. Go to elencohome.com if you have home improvement needs. It's a bye week next week, right? That'd be a good time to take care of some of that. We appreciate all of you for hanging out with us. I know that sucks, but we're still going to give you a good podcast. We'll still bring our effort. Our special teams are great. All right. We win in the margins all the time. Every podcast, we win in the margins. Thanks to Nick behind the scenes as well. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.